Welcome to the blockchain. Just kidding. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi there.
Hi. Hi. How's everybody doing?
Good.
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 Good. So thanks for chatting with me today about blockchain. I feel like we could spend, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, a year talking about this topic. It's complicated. It's interesting. Everybody wants to hear about it. You know, we just had the Super Bowl yesterday, and I don't think most of those people had ever heard so much mention of crypto and blockchain. So today's a good time to dig into it a little bit. So but we're not going to be talking about crypto so much today. We're going to be talking about a utility of blockchain that's more other business applications. So Joe, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you. The question with you. I struggle understanding the difference between like why you would implement a blockchain sort of a history or ledger over just a traditional database, because from my understanding they kind of do the same thing. What's the advantage of blockchain?
Right. So the advantage is the information is decentralized. It's distributed a bunch among a larger amount of participants. And so for things like ledgers, where you're sharing that information with different participants, and what that does is it creates a level of trust between everybody that's involved. So let's take, for instance, a typical way of setting up a database. You might have redundancies, but you typically just have one, and then that would fail over if there was any problems with that. But there's one source of truth and one person that would be responsible for that data. So in blockchain, having that distributed, it creates integrity, obviously, among everybody that's using it, but it also redundancy. Everybody has the same information distributed. So that's a big one from there. But
That's kind of the lead interest for blockchain. Yeah. So Chris, I'm gonna reinterpret what I heard from Joe, and what I want you to do is tell me if I got this right.
Okay.
It's a little like having a bunch of witnesses that all have agreed, like signed that they share a truth, like this is what happened, versus somebody being a single authority on what happened. And is that correct? Do I have that right?
Yeah, and it goes even further than that. Not only do they have an agreement on what the data and the data structures look like, but they all have their own copies of the data that's been collected. So yeah, along those lines, correct.
And what is the data? Like, what goes in there?
Good question. Could be anything really. The only restriction is that all parties have to agree to what's going to be in there, how it's stored, criteria for data to be written through the chain. Excuse me. So, and in those agreements, they have something called smart contracts, and what those are, they're business logic, business agreements that are written right into the code. And that code is also distributed. So there's a copy of that code on each participant. They call them nodes.
I'm kind of going off script here because I just heard you say something that made me think about. So when I hear a crypto evangelist talking about, currency, one of the advantages that they describe is getting rid of, whatever the middleman is, whatever the sort of like body, the authoritative body that's dictating terms around those financial interests. what you just described with the smart contract that I hadn't realized is that the contract is written into the code. So does that negate the need for an attorney involvement?
Well, attorneys would likely be involved in writing the smart contracts, the criteria for the smart contracts. It's the enforcement I think that is unique in that it's written right into the code as what gets written, how it gets written, and it's enforced on each individual node.
And so it's indelible. It is what it is.
Right, until, yeah, and that's one of the pieces, the potential drawbacks of the chain is that you can change them, but that again takes a consensus. So if the parties have an agreement and something comes up that was not anticipated, the process for changing and adapting can be long and time consuming.
Okay.
It can be changed, but again, you have to go through that whole process and get a consensus
until agreement across the board before that
difficult to change. Right.
Right. Well, that brings me to another question that I had, Jamie, about like, what are the trade-offs? What are the drawbacks? So I asked Joe about like, what's the advantage? And it sounds like it's sort of like a shared responsibility for maintaining the facts or the data that are in this database, which sounds great because then it's like harder to contest what really happened. But what are some of the downsides? Chris kind of mentioned one. It takes a long time to change.
Yeah, so that is definitely one of the big drawbacks is you have to get everybody to agree to a change. Whereas if you're only using, one database, you just need to make that change to that database or any other servers that are hosting that database. I think the other really big drawback is the amount of time it generally takes to access data off the blockchain is much slower than a traditional database. So you don't want to put things into the blockchain that are constantly changing and updating. It just makes it a lot slower for you to be able to get that information. And today you want to be able to get things right away. You need to be able to get that to do your business. So you really need to look at what you're putting into a database versus a blockchain and why. And, I think the big thing that people seem to think is that blockchain completely replaces, a traditional database, but really they're partners and they work together.
That's interesting. So that data doesn't only live on the blockchain. You can have a conventional database alongside that to just sort of be able to quickly access the data. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, you can do that. You can also store supplemental information, beyond what's stored in the blockchain. So the blockchain, will store exactly what's in the smart contract and the agreement, but there might be more details, like you want to keep something like notes or something like that in the traditional database, because you don't need to be taking, resources up in the blockchain for that.
Okay. So to summarize, the big advantage is that it's distributed. The data is distributed. The disadvantage is how difficult it is then to reformulate that data. Should there be a change or should there be some reason that you need to change it? Is that it kind of in a nutshell?
Yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell.
Okay, good. Now, the last question, I'm going to get back to you, Joe, and I would love to have a little bit of conversation with you all on this again, because it is what's on everyone's minds. If I have a business, and let's say some aspect of my business, and we'll talk about this at another time, but supply chain is a good example. Some aspect of my business I've decided to run on blockchain or maintain data on blockchain. And that seems like a pretty good idea. Do I have to use cryptocurrency to do that? Like, do I have to do like a massive overhaul of my whole fiscal situation and like no more money, only Bitcoin?
The very short answer is no, but
That is a very short
yes,
answer.
it's very short. No, cryptocurrency is you can think of it like a unit of measure that's stored in a ledger. So it's just another a type of piece of information that the ledger, keeps track of transactions. So not necessary, but it could complement your business depending on what it is.
I see you nodding, Chris. What would be
No,
an,
that's-
yeah,
Oh, I was
And-
just going to add that, blockchain is used. Let me rephrase that. Cryptocurrency is built on blockchain, but it's not the entirety of blockchain. Blockchain is the underlying storage and processing of the data. Cryptocurrency is one example of blockchain.
right. So there's no expectation that if I utilize the blockchain for some business service, that I also need to use cryptocurrency.
Correct.
Yeah, you don't have to. It's a nice, add-on if you want to, if that's something that you're interested in, but it isn't locking you into using crypto for your business.
And let's say I did want to use cryptocurrency for part of my business. Could that be part of the smart contract, or do I need to run a different sort of blockchain arrangement for cryptocurrency?
I
I
think
mean, I don't think there are any real hard and fast rules.
yeah.
A smart contract can be whatever the parties agree to. So if cryptocurrency is a part of that, so be it, I guess.
What were you going to say, Joe?
That's exactly what Chris said.
So last question. Outside of cryptocurrency, and now we're hearing about supply chain, what are other sort of business applications that you've seen that seem like they have potential or merit? Jamie?
So I think, the manufacturing industry is a really good one, when you have to keep track of what your machines are doing when, and even your employee interaction with those machines, or even, something like medical, where it's really, very important to be keeping track of those things. Blockchain really seems to work best when you have two parties that have a very specific agreement on things that have to happen, and you need to track when that happens and the details around that.
And you said two parties. Is it always just two parties, Chris?
No, it can be, that's another one that's whatever people can agree upon is what that agreement would be. Each party would, though, we talked earlier about the difficulty in changing and coming to a consensus. That would be a lot easier to make that feasible with two people. The more people you have, the more challenging that's going to be. On the other hand, the one real strong point for blockchain would be, as Joe mentioned earlier, the trust issue. Enforcing trust among large groups. If there's a small piece of a process where there have been issues, that you could implement, even a small piece of that process using blockchain, where the data is immutable, and you have the defined rules that everybody agrees to. And that can be pretty useful. But again, change is hard if you do it, if you go that direction.
Sure.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
and I was
go ahead.
going to add, it doesn't have to be between like two companies or something like that. The parties could be, yourself and your employees. It's just, it's best to have, a minimum of two people to agree to this consensus of what is happening.
Okay.
They're a minimum of 2 people, should I say?
Minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Quick lightning round. You guys ready? I'm going to ask you a question and then I'm going to call on each of you to give your answer. It's not a discussion. It's like you'll get it. So do you, looking at things now, do you think that the future for blockchain, is bullish where you don't believe in it and bearish is where you do? Which one? What's
Bullish is where good. Yeah.
bullish is like yes.
Bullish good, bearish bad.
Yep.
Bearish
Yeah.
bad. Okay. All right. I'm gonna go with each of you. Joe, the future of blockchain, bullish or bearish?
I would definitely say bullish. Except if we start getting some really good if the computers get good enough to where they can start breaking the blockchain cryptography, then I'd start worrying about that then. But otherwise, I think good thoughts for that.
Okay. You mean, in other words, if the security becomes vulnerable because the computers can.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't expect that for a couple of decades, but
But that's a theoretical possibility.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
the one that you see that is the risk, and it's right now just theory.
Yep.
Science
So,
fiction.
I was gonna say, if we get to that point, I think a lot of stuff's beyond blockchains in trouble.
Right. Yeah.
All right, Chris, the future of blockchain, bullish or
Yeah,
bearish?
I think that it has its applications, but it feels a little faddish to me at this point as well, where people might be looking to use it in places where it's maybe not the best fit.
Jamie, you're last. Bullish or bearish?
I'm going to go with a pessimist or optimistic bullish. I think, it's been around a while now. It really like kind of hung out in the like back doors of the internet for quite a while, and it's really starting to come to light. So I think, it does still have quite a potential for growth coming up, but it, like Chris said, it does need to be used appropriately. Otherwise, I think it's going to add to the detriment of it.